The war began without warning. Ships of fire rained down from the sky, cutting the silence of space with endless light. Human fleets scrambled, their engines screaming as they tried to hold back an enemy no one fully understood. It was the beginning of what would later be called the Unexpected War, a conflict that shook the galaxy and changed the path of every world it touched. Among those watching the chaos unfold was a girl unlike any other, an alien princess whose name was whispered across her people's halls with respect and fear. Her skin carried the deep glow of violet dusk, her eyes burned with golden fire, and her armor shone brighter than the sun's. She had been raised not only as royalty, but as a warrior of her empire. From childhood she had been taught that humans were dangerous, reckless, and unpredictable. They were to be avoided or destroyed, never trusted. Yet as the battles spread and worlds were consumed by fire, she found herself thinking not of her empire's victories or losses, but of one human. One man who had appeared in her visions, his face clear as if carved into her memory. She did not know why he haunted her, only that she had to find him. And so, when the war burned brightest, she left her throne and her guards behind and swore she would search the galaxy until she stood before him. On a broken world at the edge of Terran space, the human soldier fought for his life. His name was Daniel, a man of no special rank, but one whose courage had made him a symbol to those around him. He carried no crown, no mark of power, but he never abandoned anyone in the fire. When his ship was destroyed above the planet's surface, he had dragged 3 of his comrades out of the wreckage, refusing to leave even when enemy fire rained down. Rumors of him began to spread. Soldiers whispered that he could not be killed, that death itself stepped aside for him. The princess heard these rumors and knew the man described was the same one from her visions. Each report, each whisper, drew her closer. She took her warship and began her search, not as a conqueror, but as a hunter driven by something she could not name. She scoured worlds burned by conflict, walked among ruins, and questioned both friend and foe. Some told her she was chasing a ghost. Others warned her that the human she sought would never trust her kind. But still she pressed on, her determination stronger than fear. Daniel, meanwhile, had no idea that he was being hunted, not by soldiers or assassins, but by a woman who carried both beauty and danger in every step. He fought only to protect those beside him. He did not fight for glory or reward. Each day was survival, each night filled with the weight of those he could not save. Yet even in despair he remained standing, his will unbroken. This strength, unseen by him but clear to others, was what had begun to move armies and inspire hope where none should exist. The galaxy shifted. Empires clashed, fleets were shattered, and stars burned with endless fire. In the heart of it all, the paths of the princess and the soldier drew closer. Though they came from worlds that should never meet, fate pulled them across battle lines and broken skies. She searched with eyes that could pierce shadows, guided by a reason she did not yet dare to speak. He fought with hands that carried no crown but bore the weight of countless lives. The princess's ship descended one night upon a barren outpost at the edge of war. Smoke rose into the dark sky, and the ground trembled from distant fighting. She stepped onto the soil, her armor gleaming gold, her eyes scanning the battlefield. Her guards pleaded with her to stay back, but she silenced them with a glance. This was not their search, it was hers alone. Somewhere here was the man her dreams had shown her, the one whose existence pulled her across the stars. Daniel stood among the survivors, tired and bruised, his armor marked by battle. When he looked up, he saw her for the first time. A figure of violet and gold, stepping through the smoke as if untouched by war. Around them the soldiers fell silent, for no one had ever seen such a sight. The human and the alien princes facing each other for the first time on broken ground. Their eyes locked in a moment that froze the battlefield. She did not raise a weapon. He did not reach for his rifle. Between them was no sound, only the storm of war raging behind. And in that silence, each of them knew their lives had just changed forever. The battlefield around them was still alive with fire, but Daniel barely noticed it. His eyes stayed fixed on the alien woman before him. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her presence was commanding, her armor gleamed with patterns older than his world, and her golden eyes seemed to burn straight into his soul. For a long moment, neither spoke, and it felt as if the entire war had paused only for them. At last, Daniel's instincts returned. He raised his weapon slightly, not to fire, but to remind himself that this was still war. The enemy had taken too much from him for him to forget so easily. But she did not flinch at the sight of his rifle. Instead, she took a slow step forward, her movements calm and deliberate, as though she had walked through 100 storms like this before. "You are the one," she said in a voice that carried strength and something almost gentle. The words were not in his language, yet he understood them, as if they were spoken directly into his mind. Daniel narrowed his eyes, unsure if this was a trick. "One what?" he muttered under his breath, though he knew she could hear him. Her gaze never left his. "The one I have searched for." Around them, soldiers on both sides watched in silence. Neither human nor alien dared to fire, afraid that the act would shatter whatever strange moment was unfolding before their eyes. The war seemed smaller compared to the tension between the two figures standing at its center. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. He could not explain why, but something deep inside him felt the weight of her words. He had seen death more times than he cared to remember, yet standing here before her made him feel something entirely new, a sense that his life was no longer only his own. "You've got the wrong man," he finally said, his voice sharp, almost defensive. But even as he spoke, a part of him doubted his own words. The princess tilted her head slightly, her white braids shimmering in the faint firelight. "No," she answered softly. "There is no mistake." Before Daniel could respond, the battlefield roared to life again. A fresh wave of artillery screamed overhead, and the ground shook as explosions lit up the horizon. Soldiers scattered for cover, and chaos returned in an instant. The moment of silence was gone, broken by the unforgiving roar of war. The princess moved first. With inhuman speed, she raised her hand, and a shield of golden energy spread outward, deflecting the shrapnel that would have torn through them both. Daniel stumbled back in shock, staring as debris bounced harmlessly away. She had not raised a shield for herself alone. She had protected him too. Confusion raged inside him. This alien, this enemy, had just saved his life. Daniel's comrades shouted for him to retreat, but his feet refused to move. The princess turned to him, her expression fierce but not hostile. "Come with me," she said, her voice steady even as fire rained down around them. He shook his head, clutching his rifle tighter. "I can't just leave them. They need me." His eyes darted to his squad, pinned down by advancing enemy troops. Her golden eyes softened for the briefest moment, as if she had expected his answer. "Then I will fight beside you." And before he could protest, she leapt into the chaos. Her armor gleamed as she cut through the battlefield, moving with deadly grace. Each strike was precise, every motion like a dance of war. Soldiers on both sides faltered at the sight, unsure whether to fear or follow. Daniel had no choice but to join her, firing his rifle as he charged back into the fray. Together they fought, a human soldier and an alien princess, standing side by side in a storm of fire and blood. Daniel's comrades looked on in disbelief as the enemy they had feared now fought to protect them. Every time he was exposed, she was there, her shield intercepting the blows. Every time she was outnumbered, his rifle cut down her attackers. It was an unspoken rhythm, a bond forming in the heart of battle. When at last the enemy line broke and silence fell over the ruined ground, Daniel turned to her, chest heaving with exhaustion. He wanted to demand answers, but the words died on his tongue. She stood there, glowing in the fading light, Her eyes locked on his as though the rest of the world no longer mattered. "You still don't understand," she said quietly, her voice carrying through the smoke. "But you will." Daniel clenched his fists, torn between suspicion and the strange pull he felt toward her. "Why me?" he asked. Her expression remained unreadable, but her eyes burned with certainty. "Because what I want, what I need, can only be given by you." The words struck him harder than any weapon. He did not know what she meant, but he knew one thing for certain: his life was no longer only his own. When the smoke cleared and the battlefield grew quiet, Daniel could still hear the pounding of his own heart. His hands trembled from the weight of his rifle, but his eyes never left the alien princess standing before him. She was untouched, her golden armor glowing faintly under the rising dust, her gaze steady and fixed on him. Around them, his squad shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. None of them knew what to make of the scene, an enemy princess fighting at their side. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly, though his grip was tight. "You need to tell me why," he said, his voice low and sharp. The princess studied him, her golden eyes flickering as though measuring every word she would speak. "Because without you," she said softly, "my people will fall. And yours will never survive." Her words froze him. His squad exchanged confused looks, muttering in disbelief. For a moment, Daniel thought he had misheard. The enemy, the very ones who had launched fleets of fire against Earth and its colonies, were now claiming they needed him. He shook his head. "That makes no sense. You're the ones burning our worlds. You're the reason so many are dead." For the first time, a shadow of pain crossed her face. "It is not so simple," she said. Her voice was calm, but beneath it lay something deeper, almost sorrowful. "What you see is only the surface of a war that runs older than your kind. I left my throne, my army, everything, to find you. Because only you carry what can change the future." Daniel felt the weight of her words pressing against him, but he refused to give in. He had lost too much to trust easily. "If this is some trick," he said coldly, "I'll end it right here." She did not flinch. Instead, she stepped closer, her golden crown catching the light of distant fires. She moved with grace, yet her eyes carried the gravity of truth. "You think I would cross half the galaxy to lie to you?" she asked. His squad raised their weapons instinctively, aiming at her. Daniel held up his hand, motioning them to lower it. Something about her words, her presence, made him believe, even if he didn't want to. "Why me?" he asked again, this time more quietly, almost as if asking himself. The princess looked into his eyes, her voice steady. "Because you are not like the others. Your blood, your spirit, it carries what mine cannot. Together we can stop this war before it burns everything. Alone, I will fail." The soldiers behind Daniel shifted restlessly, their fear and suspicion clear. One of them stepped forward, shouting, "She's trying to confuse you. She's the enemy." Others murmured in agreement, but Daniel kept his eyes locked on hers. Something about her words made his chest tighten, a strange weight pressing down that was heavier than doubt. Before he could speak again, the sky roared with engines. More ships descended from orbit, enemy reinforcements flooding the ground with soldiers. The fight was not over. His comrades cursed, scrambling for cover, but Daniel stood firm. The princess raised her hand, summoning her golden shield once more. She looked at him, and this time her words were not a request. They were a command. "Stay with me." Daniel hesitated only for a heartbeat before moving to her side. As the next wave of war crashed down upon them, the human soldier and the alien princess fought as one. She struck with speed and elegance, her blade cutting arcs of gold through the air. Daniel covered her, each shot from his rifle clearing the path ahead. Around them, his squad could only stare in disbelief. The sight was unnatural, impossible. A human and the enemy fighting back to back, moving as though bound by something invisible. When the last soldier fell and silence returned, Daniel dropped to one knee, exhausted. His rifle hung loose in his hand, his chest heaving. The princess stood above him, calm and steady, her golden armor shining through the haze. She extended her hand to him, not as a ruler, not as an enemy, but as someone who had made her choice. Daniel looked at her hand, then at her eyes. His mind told him not to trust, but his heart whispered something else. Slowly, he reached out and took it. The princess's grip was firm, her touch warm despite the cold metal of her armor. "Now you understand," she said quietly. "You are part of this war, whether you choose it or not. But with you, it can end differently." Daniel's chest tightened as he realized the truth. His life was no longer his own. He had been pulled into something far larger, something that reached beyond his world, beyond his people. The galaxy was burning, and somehow he was at the center of it. The night after the battle was filled with silence. The outpost lay in ruins, the fires finally dying as smoke curled into the sky. Daniel sat near the wreckage of a broken wall, his rifle resting across his lap. He had survived worse battles before, but this time was different. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her golden gaze. Every time he tried to think of what to do next, he remembered her words he still could not explain. The princess stood a short distance away, apart from his squad. She looked almost untouchable as she gazed up at the stars, her armor glinting softly in the moonlight. His men kept whispering, none of them able to decide if she was their enemy or their savior. Daniel himself did not know what to believe. Finally, he stood and walked toward her. The gravel crunched under his boots, drawing her attention. She turned her head, her golden eyes meeting his with quiet certainty. "You owe me answers," he said. His voice calm but heavy. She nodded slowly. "And you will have them. But you must listen, not as a soldier, not as an enemy. You must listen as one who carries more than he knows." Daniel frowned, unsettled by her words. "Then tell me, why search for me? Why abandon your throne? Why risk everything for a human you've never met?" For the first time since he had seen her, she let the strength in her expression falter. There was no pride in her face now, no command in her voice, only truth. "Because you are not a stranger to me. I saw you long before this war. In visions and dreams, in echoes of the old power that guides my people. They showed me a man who stood where others fell, a man who carried fire in his heart strong enough to change the course of stars. That man was you." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Dreams? You started a war over dreams?" Her gaze darkened. "No, the war was never mine to start. The war is a shadow passed down through ages, a fire born long before you humans even left your world. My empire fights because it is chained to it. I fight because I want to break those chains." She stepped closer, her golden armor gleaming faintly. "And the only way I can is with you." Daniel shook his head, struggling to understand. "I'm just a soldier. I'm no king, no hero. If you came all this way thinking I could save your people, you chose wrong." Her lips curved in the smallest hint of a smile, though her eyes remained serious. "You see only what you are now. I see what you can be. That is why I searched for you." He wanted to argue, to push her away with anger, but the truth weighed on him. He remembered the way she had fought beside him, the way her shield had saved him when no one else could. She had risked her life to stand at his side when she had no reason to. The memory refused to leave him. One of his soldiers interrupted, stepping forward with fury in his voice. "We can't trust her. She's the reason we're dying out here. Let's end this now before she betrays us." Daniel raised a hand, stopping him. His eyes never left hers. "If you wanted me dead," he said to her, "you had every chance. Instead, you protected me. Why?" Her answer was simple, but it carried the weight of stars. "Because without you, I am nothing. With you, there is hope." The words sank into him like steel. He wanted to deny them, to say they were lies, But deep down he felt something stir. Hope was something he had not felt in a long time. The princess stepped closer, close enough that the glow of her golden eyes reflected in his. I did not cross the galaxy for conquest. I crossed it for you. And now, the war is not only mine. It belongs to us both. Daniel's heart pounded. He had spent his life fighting to protect others, never expecting anything beyond the battlefield. But now, standing before her, he realized his fight had only just begun. He had become part of something greater, something that could change the galaxy itself. The morning came slowly, a dim light spilling across the ruined outpost. Daniel had not slept. He sat against the cold wall of stone, his rifle leaning nearby, his thoughts too heavy for rest. Every sound of distant gunfire reminded him where he was still in a war that showed no mercy. Yet his mind was no longer only on survival. It was caught on the alien princess and the weight of her words. She stood not far from him, quiet and unmoving, her golden armor faintly glowing in the dawn. Her people's soldiers had not come to claim her back, and his own squad avoided her as if she were a storm that might strike at any moment. But Daniel felt no fear in her presence. Instead, he felt the burden of a choice pressing down on him. At last, she turned and spoke, her voice low but steady. You cannot remain here. More fleets will come, more blood will spill. If you stay, you will die with them. Daniel's eyes narrowed. And if I go with you? What happens then? You step into a truth far greater than this war, she answered. Her golden gaze held his without wavering. You will see what your people cannot, what even mine have forgotten. And with you, there may be an end to this fire. He shook his head. You're asking me to abandon my men, my world. Everything I've sworn to protect. She took a step closer, the glow of her armor casting faint light on his face. I do not ask you to abandon them. I ask you to save them. You cannot do that by staying in the mud of every battlefield. You can only do it by standing where no one else dares to stand. Her words cut through him. For years, Daniel had fought to protect those around him, dragging men from wreckage, holding lions against impossible odds. But he knew deep down it was never enough. No matter how hard he fought, the war only spread. Her voice planted a seed of doubt inside him, doubt that maybe his path required more than his rifle and his stubborn will. One of his soldiers, a younger man named Carter, stepped forward. Sir, you're not thinking of listening to her, are you? She's the enemy. If you go with her, you're betraying everything we've bled for. Daniel stared at the young soldier. Carter's face was marked with dirt and fear, his eyes burning with desperation. Daniel understood him. He had once spoken with that same certainty. But now, after everything he had seen, certainty felt like a fragile shield. She saved us, Daniel said quietly. Without her, we'd be nothing but bodies on this field. That doesn't mean she's telling the truth. Carter snapped. The princess's eyes flickered with something close to pity. You cannot see what is coming, she said to the soldier, her voice calm but firm. But he can. That is why I chose him. Daniel raised a hand, silencing the argument. He knew there was no way to convince his squad, not yet. He barely understood it himself. But the fire in her words lingered in his chest. Later, as the sun reached higher, the princess led him away from the outpost to the edge of a broken ridge. From there, the battlefield stretched far and wide, littered with the scars of war. Smoke coiled from the wreckage of ships, and the air was heavy with ash. This is only one field, she said, her voice soft. Multiply it by 1,000, and you will know what is happening across the stars. Both our people will burn if nothing changes. She turned her gaze to him. You have the power to change it, Daniel. Not because of your weapons, not because of your rank, but because of who you are. He frowned, unsure. And who am I to you? She stepped closer until her golden eyes filled his vision. You are the one my visions showed me. the one who can stand where empires fall. You are the answer I sought across the galaxy. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to call it madness, to push her away. But something inside him told him she was not lying. She had risked everything to find him, crossing stars and worlds, leaving her crown and people behind. No one would do that for a lie. For a long time, he said nothing. The war raged on in the distance, a storm that neither of them could ignore. Finally, Daniel let out a slow breath. If I go with you, this doesn't end with me kneeling to your empire. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. No, this ends with the galaxy kneeling to something greater than empires. Daniel stared at her, his heart pounding. He did not yet understand what she meant, but he knew one thing with certainty. His choice had already been made. Daniel followed her across the ruined land until they reached the place where her ship waited. It was unlike any vessel he had ever seen. Its surface shimmered like flowing metal, alive with patterns of gold that pulsed in rhythm with the stars above. His squad refused to come closer, watching from the distance with suspicion in their eyes. Daniel understood their fear, but something inside him told him this was the path he had to take. The princess stood before the ship, her armor catching the light of the sun as it broke through the clouds. She turned to him, her golden eyes burning brighter than ever. "This is where your choice must be made," she said. "Step aboard, and you step into a destiny that will bind us both. Turn away, and the war will consume us all." Daniel looked back at his men. They were tired, broken, clinging to hope in a war that had taken too much. He had fought beside them through fire and loss, but he knew now that staying meant only more death. He clenched his fists and turned back to her. "I'll go, but not as your prisoner, and not as your servant. If I do this, I do it as myself." The princess bowed her head, the first gesture of humility he had seen from her. "Not as prisoner, not as servant, as equal." With those words, Daniel stepped aboard. The air inside the ship was warm, alive with strange energy. Symbols carved into the walls glowed faintly, and as he walked deeper, he felt a hum in his chest, as if the vessel itself was testing him. The princess moved beside him with calm certainty. At the heart of the ship was a chamber unlike anything he had known. A crystal stood tall, pulsing with golden light, and its glow filled the room with warmth. The princess placed her hand on it, and the patterns of her armor responded, shining in harmony. She turned to Daniel. "This is the core of memory," she explained. "It holds the truth of my people. For centuries we fought to protect it, yet we forgot what it truly meant. The visions it gave me showed you. A human. A soldier who carries the fire to unite what is broken." Daniel stared at the crystal, its light reflecting in his eyes. "Why me?" he asked one last time, his voice quiet. She stepped closer, her hand reaching for his. "Because your people are not chained by the past. Because you fight not for empire or crown, but for each other. That is what we have lost. That is what only you can remind us of." When his hand touched the crystal beside hers, a surge of light filled the chamber. Images rushed through his mind, stars being born, empires rising and falling, countless wars that had bled the galaxy dry. And in the center of it all, he saw himself standing not alone, but beside her, holding back the fire of destruction with nothing but their will combined. The vision ended, and he gasped, pulling his hand back. But the truth was now clear to him. The war was not about one empire against another. It was a storm that had swallowed the galaxy for ages. And somehow, he and this alien princess were the key to breaking it. She looked at him, her voice steady. "Do you see now? What I want is not conquest. What I want is an end. And only with you can it be done." Daniel's chest rose and fell with deep breaths. He felt the weight of countless lives pressing on his shoulders, but he did not turn away. He nodded slowly. "Then we do it together." For the first time, Her stern expression softened to something gentle, almost human. A small smile curved her lips. "Together," she said. The ship rose into the sky, leaving the broken battlefield behind. For the soldiers who watched from below, the sight was burned into memory, a human and the alien princess, standing side by side as they vanished into the stars. The war was not over, but for the first time, there was hope that it could end. And it would be because one human and one alien dared to walk a path no one else had the courage to take.